Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through all that information noise and really give you the knowledge you need, fast and thorough. And if you're listening today, chances are you've probably tried to manifest something, maybe abundance, maybe clarity, maybe even that $1 million, and you've probably hit a bit of a wall.
Oh, yeah. It's that classic self-help paradox, isn't it? I mean, you've got millions of books out there, decades of people talking about affirmations, vision boards everywhere. But, if those traditional law of attraction ideas were like universally effective, the success rate would look a lot different. It'd be much higher.
That's exactly where we're jumping off from today. This deep dive, it's really an investigation into let's call it the science of wealth manifestation. We want to contrast those old ways with, well, a proposed new neurological approach. It's detailed in our source material, specifically something called the Billionaire Brain Wave program, or BBW. Our mission here is to move past just wishing and hoping and actually look into, verifiable brain science.
Right. We're digging into the claim that you don't necessarily need more willpower to change your financial situation. What you might need, according to this, is a specific shift in your brain's frequency.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Because, if the traditional methods, the conscious ones, work so incredibly well, why do so many people still feel like they're struggling? Like they can't attract abundance, or they're just, fighting this constant uphill battle every single day. So let's start with what most people are actually doing right now, based on the sources. What are those common tools in that traditional law of attraction toolkit?
Well, the standard playbook, it's pretty extensive, but the core tools, they're really laser focused on the conscious mind. So that involves reciting positive affirmations, saying things like, I am rich, or money flows easily to me, often like hundreds of times a day. Then there's intensive visualization, building these really detailed vision boards, keeping gratitude journals rigorously. It's all focused on that end result you want.
Yeah, I know. I've definitely been there. You start off really strong, right? You repeat the affirmations, you stare at the board, and then, I don't know, after a week or two, it just starts to feel exhausting, kind of forced,
Exactly, that exhaustion. That's actually a key symptom of the fundamental limitation here. The fatal flaw, as our sources describe it, is that these methods are only talking to the conscious part of your brain. You, the listener, you're putting in all this effort with that small part of your brain that thinks and plans and analyzes things.
And remind us, what percentage of our total brain power is that conscious mind actually, controlling day to day?
It's tiny. A really small fraction. Your subconscious mind, that's the part running on autopilot. It controls something like 95% of your daily thoughts, your habits, your actions. Think of it like the conscious mind is the little app you have open on your computer screen. The subconscious, that's the huge, deeply programmed operating system running basically everything else in the background.
95%. Wow. Okay, that statistic really changes the whole picture. So I can sit there and consciously tell myself, I deserve immense wealth over and over. But if my operating system, my subconscious, was programmed way back when to believe, I don't know, money is bad or I'm just not worthy of success, then that battle is pretty much lost before it starts.
Absolutely. The second that conscious affirmation hits that conflicting subconscious program, the brain's internal defense mechanism just kicks right in. It literally perceives the affirmation as false, as a lie. And that little internal voice you hear, the who are you kidding, or that's not really true. That's the sound of your subconscious actively rejecting the positive input. That causes that emotional resistance, makes you feel completely stuck. You're basically trying to overwrite years, maybe decades, of deep conditioning using only, 5% effort.
Okay, that makes the frustration so much more understandable then.
Right.
It feels like you're just paddling like mad upstream against the powerful current of your own core beliefs.
Yeah.
All right, so if willpower and all that conscious effort can't really override that massive 95%, the big question becomes, how do we talk directly to that subconscious operating system, without the critical conscious mind constantly getting in the way? We need that scientific shift.
And that's exactly where this frequency-based approach claims to come in. The core idea is to stop trying to force belief through repetition and instead actually tune the brain into a state where it's naturally inherently receptive to new programming. The central scientific concept here revolves around a very specific frequency, 7.83 hertz.
7.83 hertz. That sounds really precise. And the sources connect this to the Schumann resonance, don't they? The Earth's natural frequency. Okay, wait a second. That part sounds a little maybe esoteric. How exactly does the science in our sources bridge that gap between an Earth frequency and a measurable change in our brainwaves?
Yeah, it's a compelling connection they draw. The source material essentially claims that whether you focus on the cosmic connection or not, 7.83 hertz is the statistically reproducible brainwave frequency they observe in peak performers. So whether it's, say, monks in really deep meditation, elite athletes totally in the zone, or these world-class CEOs who seem to operate so effortlessly, their brain state, when measured, consistently hits this specific frequency.
And neurologically speaking, where does 7.83 hertz actually land on the brainwave spectrum?
It falls squarely into the theta state. Now, theta, this is that really deep mental zone. It happens right in that space between being fully awake and just about to fall asleep. And crucially, when your brain is producing these theta waves, that critical conscious filter we talked about, it gets lowered dramatically. This makes the subconscious mind exceptionally pliable. It becomes highly suggestible, very receptive to new, empowering input.
Okay, that explains the why it might work. But now, here's where we need that technical deep dive. How does this BBW program physically take someone's brain, which is probably anxious conscious, operating way up in a high beta state, right? How does it physically move it down to that perfect 7.83 hertz theta state? What's the mechanism?
Right, and this is the mechanism that really separates this approach from just, say, visualization or affirmations. It relies on precise sound technology, specifically binaural beats. The process works by delivering two slightly different sound frequencies to each ear through headphones. So, for example, maybe 300 hertz to your left ear and 300.83 hertz to your right ear.
So two distinct inputs slightly off from each other.
Exactly. And when these two slightly different tones meet inside your brain naturally tries to reconcile the difference between them. It effectively creates a third, phantom frequency, which is the mathematical difference between those two inputs. So in our example, 7.83 hertz. Your brain then begins to naturally synchronize, or the technical term is entrain, itself to match that 7.83 hertz difference frequency. It's described as a non-invasive, purely physiological process. It bypasses that conscious resistance entirely and actively, nudges the brain into that highly receptive theta state. Okay, so once the brain is chemically and physically tuned to that 7.83 hertz theta state, that's when the real rewiring, according to the sources, begins. The key difference here is that the BBW approach claims to work from the inside out. It changes the brain's fundamental operating frequency rather than trying to force an outcome through willpower. And this leads to the 5 specific neural changes that the source material really highlights.
All right, let's detail that shift. Step 1 sounds like it's about basic survival mechanisms, just calming the system down.
It is, fundamentally. That 7.83 hertz frequency is said to immediately help neutralize the brain's chronic fight-or-flight mode, which, let's face it, is often the default setting when we're thinking about scarcity or lack. When you're stressed, your brain is focused only on immediate survival, right? Not on long-term opportunities. So calming down that stress response is absolutely foundational.
Right, which then opens the door for step 2. That easy subconscious receptivity. Makes sense. If the stress level drops and the conscious filter is kind of offline, those new wealth beliefs can actually start to take root without that immediate rejection we talked about.
Precisely. But then step 3 is arguably the most valuable piece of intel here for anyone looking to increase opportunities appearing in their life. It's the reprogramming of the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The RAS. That thing is fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm sure we explain this clearly for everyone. It's not like a physical part of the brain that does the seeing, but it's more like the gatekeeper for what the brain actually pays attention to.
Exactly. Think of your RAS like a super selective concierge at a very busy hotel. It's filtering millions, literally millions, of bits of sensory information every single second. And it only hands over to your conscious awareness what it deems relevant based on your current beliefs and focus. So if you're constantly thinking about scarcity, guess what? Your RAS diligently filters out opportunities and potentially helpful ideas because they don't match the program. You know that phenomenon where you decide to buy a new car, maybe a slightly unusual red one, and then suddenly you see that exact red car everywhere. That's your RAS, confirming its relevance to your new focus.
Okay, so if this BBW frequency helps reprogram the RAS to look for abundance, then the user isn't just hoping for opportunities anymore. Their brain is actually physically filtering their reality differently to automatically spot connections, ideas, potential pathways that they used to just completely overlook because they were deemed irrelevant before.
Exactly. It literally changes your perceived reality by changing the future settings, so to speak. And then, supporting all this, there's the chemical shift, which is the 4th claimed outcome.
Okay, what are the chemical changes happening?
Well, listening to this frequency is claimed to actually increase the levels of key neurotransmitters in the brain, specifically dopamine and serotonin. These are often called the feel-good chemicals, right? Pleasure, motivation, creativity. They naturally improve your mood, boost your motivation, both of which are absolutely essential if you're going to take sustained action on those new opportunities. It directly links that positive emotional state to, well, manifestation power.
And I guess that leads pretty naturally to the final step, step 5,
Right.
that automatic action alignment. If your brain is tuned right, your RAS is spotting openings, and the brain chemistry is supporting motivation. The actual behavior starts to shift without needing that constant grueling willpower push.
That's the idea. The individual stops forcing change and starts almost automatically thinking, feeling, and acting like a person who attracts wealth. They start making different decisions, engaging in different conversations, pursuing actions that align naturally with their goals, often effortlessly. It's described as this comprehensive shift, neural entrainment combined with deep subconscious programming.
Wow, okay, the comparison between these two approaches feels incredibly stark now. You've got the traditional methods relying on repetition, sheer effort, and basically force. And then this BBW approach seems to rely on frequency, resonance, and flow.
Yeah, and the analogy used in the source material is pretty powerful here, I think. They compare traditional manifestation to paddling upstream. It's constant effort, you're burning energy, you're actively fighting against the current of your old ingrained beliefs, which is exactly why it so often feels slow, exhausting, and ultimately why it might fail for so many.
Right. Whereas using this kind of brainwave activation is positioned more like floating with the current. The movement feels natural, it feels fast, it feels powerful, because your internal frequency is actually aligning with your desired outcome. You're not fighting yourself anymore.
And that internal alignment is apparently why the source claims that many users, people who've struggled for years with conscious effort techniques, they often report seeing tangible changes, sometimes within just days of using this technology consistently. Because it's not just creating a temporary spike in motivation. The claim is the entrainment creates a lasting, measurable neural imprint, a change in the wiring.
And our sources make a pretty strong claim about the practicality, too. Dissolving those limiting beliefs, activating this so-called wealth code, it's only claimed to require 7 minutes a day. That sounds incredibly fast, especially when you compare it to potentially years of journaling and affirming.
It is a remarkable claim, absolutely, and it hinges entirely on that premise that you're bypassing the 95% conscious resistance factor. If you only need to program the receptive subconscious mind for, say, 7 minutes while it's optimally in that theta state, then yeah, the required time investment could theoretically drop dramatically.
But let me just ask the skeptical question here. If it's really only 7 minutes a day, I mean, why isn't everyone using this and becoming a billionaire? Is there any mention in the source about, like, potential dependence on the technology or the need for really sustained long-term use?
That's a fair question. The sources do suggest that consistent daily application is necessary, especially initially, to really set those new neural pathways. They seem to emphasize that the technology creates the potential, it creates the internal alignment and the receptivity, but the individual still needs to actually act on the opportunities that their newly tuned RAS starts presenting to them. So the tech is positioned as maybe a shortcut to the optimal state, but not a complete substitute for taking action in the world.
Okay, so what does this all really boil down to then? It kind of feels like the whole conversation around self-improvement, especially manifestation, might be shifting away from just mind over matter towards something more like frequency over effort. It's positioning this idea of managing your brain frequency as potentially the future of manifestation.
Exactly. It seems to be moving away from that older model of, just think positive thoughts and wait for good things to happen, and moving towards what's presented as a verifiable, maybe even science-based approach, focused on tuning the brain to that very specific 7.83 hertz resonance. The same resonance, they claim, that the world's wealthiest, most creative, most effective minds seem to operate on naturally, automatically.
So the core takeaway seems to be that your internal frequency might actually dictate the opportunities your brain is physically capable of even noticing. And that raises a really fascinating final question for you, the listener, to maybe chew on as you wrap up this deep dive with us. If your reticular activating system, your RAS, filters your entire reality based on whether you're operating in a frequency of scarcity or abundance, what other critical aspects of your daily life, things completely beyond just wealth, might you be unconsciously filtering out right now? Simply because you're not typically in that receptive, open theta state. Think about, I don't know, creative breakthroughs or moments of intuitive guidance, or maybe even profound connections with other people. If the theta state unlocks receptivity for wealth, what else could it potentially unlock in other areas of your life?
The implications of neuroplasticity and manipulating brain frequency, they could be vast, reaching far, far beyond just the bank account. It really speaks to the potential power of being in the right internal state.
A deep thought indeed for a deep dive. Thank you for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next one.